Hey guys, I'm Lee Taylor. That's the brand new 2021 Hyundai Tucson and the 2021 Mazda CX-5. And this is a Right Lane Review. Mazda's tried and true CX-5 and Hyundai's brand new Tucson aim to give buyers excellent choices for a new SUV. The Asian car makers are notoriously good at practical family cars, so let's compare some notes. The modern SUV market is super competitive, as we know, and if you're looking to spend about $50,000 before on-roads, these two should be on your radar. They both offer plenty of bang for buck, turbocharged petrol engines attached to all-wheel drive systems, and lots of family-friendly space. So, which ones do we think are better? So let's get these SUVs out on the road for the comparison. The first one up is the oldie but the goodie. So this CX-5 has been around platform-wise for coming up on 10 years. So it's pretty well proven, very tried and true. And I think that Mazda has done a really good job of making sure this car had plenty of time to mature. And it feels very mature. When you're driving it around town, it's quite smooth. It feels very refined, it's very quiet. It's easy to see out of, easy to park, has pretty good tech. I mean, it has a surround view camera that makes parking in tight spots pretty easy. It's a relatively small footprint, and it feels like a Mazda in the hands. And what I mean by that is Mazda, as I think I said in the CX-30, they have an interesting way of building in this sort of athleticism into their cars, even cars that aren't designed to be sports cars. So the steering is heavier than any other brand would naturally be in a normal mode, but it's not too heavy. It feels nice. It feels nicely weighted. The car is responsive. Even though it's using an older drivetrain, it's still quite responsive in its state. So this is the Akira model, and with the Akira you have pretty much no else you can choose option-wise. It's pretty much loaded CX-5. The only thing you have to worry about is figuring out which engine you want. And you have three choices. You have a 2.5 liter inline four-cylinder with no turbo, and just naturally aspirated. You have a 2.2 liter turbocharged diesel model, and then you have this, which is the 2.5 liter turbocharged petrol model, and it's 2.5 liters inline four-cylinder, north of 200 kilowatts, about 420 newton meters of torque, and it's pretty punchy. And it is attached to a 6-speed traditional automatic and all-wheel drive in this Akira model, and it feels very good. It doesn't make a great noise. I have to admit it's a bit growly, but it's a very, very good engine, very powerful, and the way that Mazda has set this car up, it feels really smooth in the hands. And like I said, Mazda's great at making cars that feel athletic without making them too much. It soaks up the bumps really nicely, it turns in really well. It has that Mazda G-Vector control, which does a little brake magic on the front axle to make it feel a bit more athletic than it really is. Now, a couple of things around town. It is a lovely machine to drive. It feels a little bit heavier than some. That's that Mazda feel I talk about. But it also is lacking a few safety things that the Tucson has. So this has all your normal safety suite, blind spot monitors, forward collision warning, rear cross traffic alert, that sort of thing. Even has some really good park tech with surround view cameras and whatnot. But it's missing some more advanced safety technician. Like it doesn't self-center when it's cruise control, even though it does have adaptive cruise and it's a pretty good system. It also doesn't have a blind spot monitor that will alert you if something's coming up on you when you're stationary. So the Tucson will actually stop you from opening the door. The CX-5 just doesn't have that tech yet. Maybe on the new redesign coming up in the next year or so they'll add it in, but for now it's just lacking a few extra bits that cars like the Tucson and the Tiguan and even the RAV4 actually have. But I have to say, it is a very refined drive. It's very smooth. It soaks up the bumps really nicely, even on these bigger wheels. It feels great in the hands. It isn't using an older drivetrain, but it is still popping along without any issues, so there's no jerky dual clutchness that you might get in the Tucson or in the Tiguan. It just feels really nice to drive. Like, it's very comfortable. You can get in immediately and feel right at home. It's very quiet. My only thing is some of the ergonomics are a bit weird. So the car was built primarily for a left-hand drive market, so the center stack is a bit skewed away from the driver. So for example, my heated steering wheel, the button's over near the passenger and not next to me as the driver where there's a blank spot where a button would be. So that little things like that are a bit weird. The stop-start system is really, really good. Now the Tucson doesn't have a stop-start system. Hyundai in general doesn't really use it. but cars like the Tiguan and the Ford Escape all use it. And this iStop system, which is Mazda speak for stop-start, is so impressive that Borko, our cameraman, didn't even notice it had it after driving it for 3 days until today. That's how good it is. Like, you just don't even notice it. It just comes on, comes off, super quick, super easy, and the gearbox and engine just kind of make up for it. And it's just a lovely place to be. It feels a bit smaller in the hands than the Tucson does. I guess it's because it is a bit smaller platform. But overall, it's just a very, very refined vehicle. And if you can deal with the lack of certain technology and a little bit of the age factor happening with this car, it's a really nice option in the midsize segment. So let's get the Tucson out on the open road. Now, immediately jumping from the CX-5 into the Tucson, a couple of things stand out. One is that this car doesn't feel quite as refined as the CX-5 does, and that's probably because Mazda's had a number of years to really work the bugs out of the CX-5, the current CX-5 platform. Another piece is just the drivetrain and the way this car is set up. So Hyundai does tune the suspension in the Tucson locally, so the dampers are set up to handle Australian roads a little bit better, and it does a pretty good job, if I'm honest. It is a little bit on the stiff side for some, I would reckon, but it does well overall. You have a few more drive modes as well. So you have Eco, Comfort, and Sport, and there's also Smart in the Tucson. And Smart in previous Hyundais and even Genesis models I've said isn't that smart, and I stand by that for most things. But this one actually is a bit less dumb. It tends to keep up a little bit better, which is nice. Not to mention you have all the great safety sense technology, forward collision warning, rear collision warning, cross traffic alert. It does this cool thing where it can see down the side of the car when you're stationary, so if you go to open the door and there's a cyclist or a car coming, it actually won't let you do it, which is quite a nice gesture, so you don't lose a door. But overall, from those perspectives and from the tech perspective, it's definitely a cut above the CX-5. It feels a bit more modern, if you will. In its hands and dynamically, it feels like a typical SUV. It's reasonably light on its feet, it's easy to see out of, relatively easy to park despite a somewhat large turning circle. I think it's probably one of the worst turning circles I've driven in the small SUV segment. It's not my favorite, so keep that in mind. But it is a bit longer car than the CX-5. And there's not a whole lot to complain about. The one thing that I do want to make sure everyone is aware of is that this 1.6 liter turbo engine only comes available with the dual clutch automatic. Now the 1.6 is a pretty good little engine, makes about 130 kilowatts, 230 newton meters of torque, and the 7-speed dual clutches in this unit is okay. It's not the best dual clutch out there, it's not the worst dual clutch out there. It can be a little bit jerky at low speed, so like you're coming off the throttle and back on the throttle at urban speeds, it can be a bit kind of confused. It's not as bad as the old Tucson was that I drove about a year ago, and it feels okay. Obviously, I think Volkswagen does it better. Renault does it well. It's just something to think about. You do also have the option of a diesel engine in the Tucson at almost every trim level in the all-wheel drive models, which is a 2-liter unit and an 8-speed traditional automatic. And there's also the option for a 2-liter petrol engine in a CVT, but that's front-wheel drive only. So if you want all-wheel drive, you got to pick between a dual clutch and a diesel. But overall, if you think about the Tucson and the CX-5, and particularly the Tucson, there's a lot of great options for medium SUVs in the market, and there's no really bad options. It really just boils down to what you want to drive. So while the Tucson doesn't feel quite as refined as the CX-5, perhaps it feels a little bit more modern to drive and a bit more athletic. So just things to note. So how's the interior on the Tucson? Well, to start with, I actually quite like the design in here. It kind of wraps around this boat sort of feel, which I appreciate. You sit behind Hyundai's new wheel, and it's not my favorite design, but it does work pretty well and everything falls nice to hand. In this Elite model, we have a partial digital dash, but in the Highlander model, you can have Hyundai's full digital dash, which is really nice, as well as a heads-up display on the higher models. In the middle, in your center stack, you have a nice big display, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all through a wire. You do have wireless phone charging here as well. All of your climate controls are here, straight to hand. Most of your driving controls are down low. Heated seats in this Elite, but you can also get cool seats in the Highlander, as well as a roof in the higher models as well. And overall, there's plenty of storage spots, plenty of places to put things, and it's a nice place to be. The only thing is the materials in here aren't quite as good as that in the CX-5, but overall, well done Hyundai. So how's the back of the Tucson? Well, to start with, there's a ton of room back here. I have great knee and leg room, plenty of head and shoulder room, and nice comfortable leather seats just like in the front. And in the Highlander models, the outboard seats are actually heated. And in this car, they're not, but still very, very comfortable. I have a couple of USB points at the bottom, a couple of vents for the aircon, the usual armrest and cup holders. Overall, I think there's quite a bit more room in here than in the CX-5, and it's a bit more comfortable in that respect. So definitely keep that in mind if you have overly tall children or are lugging adults and dogs around all the time. So how's the boot in the back of the Tucson? Well, to start with, this car is the Elite model, so we don't have an automatic tailgate, but you can get it in the Highlander model, which is what competes with the Acura CX-5. But once you get the boot open, there is a ton of space in here, plenty of room for bags, grocery shopping, trips to Bunnings or IKEA, I mean, plenty of space. Plus the seats do fold down flat, which means you have a bit more space than in the CX-5. Overall, it's pretty easy to use, and there is a full-size spare underneath just in case. So how's the interior on the CX-5? Well, to start with, it is absolutely beautiful fit and finish wise in here. I mean, I dare say there's no other SUV at $50,000 plus that is this nice. I mean, beautiful materials, beautiful leather, beautiful metal finishes, beautiful seats, and it's a lovely place to be. That being said, there are a few little things we're going to get to. So to start with, we have a beautiful Mazda wheel directly in front of you. It's pretty easy to use, feels a little bit last generation, but pretty usual. You have a mix of digital and analog gauges, which is actually probably the best mix in the business. It looks actually like gauges despite being screens, and it looks lovely. Have a heads-up display and a secure model. On the infotainment unit, this is where everything kind of falls apart a little bit for me. So the infotainment unit is a bit old. It's not touchscreen. You do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but everything's controlled through this like iDrive control unit. But you do have heated seats, cooled seats, automatic climate, 360 cameras, park sensors, a Bose stereo, a sunroof, a little bit small, but a sunroof no less, and plenty of cubbies to use around. So if you can get over the infotainment system, this is probably one of the best interiors for the midsize SUV market, full stop. To get anything better than this, you have to spend about 10 grand more on a Tiguan. So how is the back of the CX-5? Well, to start with, it's a bit more cramped than the back of the Tucson, which was to be expected, but a little bit less knee room and leg room, but overall still plenty of room for a 6-foot tall adult. And the fit and finish from the front extends all the way in the back. So you have this lovely leather, all the nice little touches with the wood, and these lovely like dark brown seats, which are fantastic. A couple of vents here in the middle, and your USB points and heated seat buttons are actually in the armrest with the cup holders, which is a kind of a cool place to put it, but if you have 3 people in the car, you won't be able to get to them, so something to keep in mind. So how's the boot in the back of the CX-5? Well, to start with, you have a nice automatic gate in this Acura model, and on the inside is plenty of space. Plenty of room for trips away, trips to the airport, a couple bags, trips to Bunnings, that sort of thing. Plus the seats do fold down in individual section, and there's a couple other cubbies for bits and bobs. Underneath is a space saver spare, but my favorite feature is actually this load cover, which attaches to the door instead of the inside of the cargo area. So when you open it up, it kind of comes with you. It kind of creates this nice privacy sort of shade, and overall, pretty nice touch. So what's the top tops, bottoms, and final verdict between the new Hyundai Tucson and the Mazda CX-5. So what's on bottom for the CX-5? Well, to start with, it's a little bit of an aging platform, so some of the safety tech is not quite as good as the safety sense systems in the Tucson, for example, and the infotainment system feels very old and very last generation. It's just a bit clunky. Beyond that, the back of the car is just a little bit tight when you compare it to others in the market. So what's on top for the CX-5? Well, to start with, it is a Mazda, so it drives brilliantly. It feels fantastic in the hands, and that 2.5 liter turbocharged engine really has some punch, even though it is attached to an old slush box. And overall, it's a good looking machine, and the interior just feels incredibly well made and very upscale. So what's on bottom for the Tucson? Well, to begin with, this is the 1.6 liter turbo model, and it's got the dual clutch gearbox, so it's a little bit clunky around town and not quite as smooth as some of its competitors that use more traditional automatics. Overall, it's got pretty good tech, but it is missing surround view camera as an option for the park systems, and Hyundai in general doesn't quite have as good safety park tech as some of its competitors like Mazda, and it just doesn't quite feel as upscale as the Mazda. So what's on top for the Tucson? Well, to start with, I think it is a fantastic looking SUV inside and out. This new design philosophy that Hyundai is using really is making a mark. Not to mention that on the inside, it's packed full of great tech all the way up the lineup, which really makes the car a bit more of a value proposition. And there's tons of space. The back seat in this thing is incredibly comfortable, and the boot is incredibly usable. So what's my final verdict between the CX-5 and the new Tucson? Well, to be fair, a lot of it's gonna come down to personal choice. If you want a car that feels more modern and has all the great new tech with a great design, you grab the Tucson. If you want a car a bit more thought out and a bit more refined, you grab the CX-5. So really, choice is yours. All right. Sorry, I just inhaled a fly. God, that was gross. All right. You can probably see it on camera because he was huge. I saw him coming.
That's what she said.
I saw him coming.
No time, but she did. No time!